a walk through Carlisle Cemetery.
I've taken groups and individuals round Carlisle Cemetery over many years, but never before virtually. So where do I start? Well, at the beginning, I suppose. And my beginning, my first time exploring the cemetery was, I reckon, in the late 80s. I was a walk leader with the East Cumbria Countryside Project, an excellent voluntary body that gathered its volunteer leaders together for fellowship and training twice a year, and extra to this for first aid sessions and so on. One of the other leaders was Ken West, bereavement services manager, and the man whose vision and implementations gave the cemetery and crematorium the top national award, which it continued to hold until the scheme was wound up. He invited us all to the cemetery for his walk, and his enthusiasm fired me to take a U3A group that I was leading at the time for the walk later, and we went quite a few more times at their request. Later, after I was ordained, I met up with Ken many times when I was taking funerals at the crematorium or in the chapel. Now, the cemetery's beginning was in 1855. It is one of the most interesting places in the city. Indeed, it is the city of the dead, with over 100,000 residents. They lie amongst beautiful trees, surrounded by wildlife. Bird and bat boxes have been installed, and butterfly beds and wildflower areas are amongst the initiatives. It's a place for the peaceful contemplation of modern life by appreciating the labours, the poverty, the wealth, and the achievements of those buried beneath this hallowed ground. In the early Victorian period, an increasing population, poor housing and poor water resulted in cholera and typhus epidemics. The cathedral grounds and other city churchyards were unable to decently inter those who died. Consequently, the burials polluted the wells from which people drew water. The new cemetery, the council, as in other cities, improved this situation by creating a new cemetery out in the countryside where pollution would not occur. The site chosen was Spittal Moor, the nearest site suitable for burial at 6 feet without encountering water. The new cemetery was immediately popular and brought an end to the traditional churchyard burial which had existed in the city for over 900 years. By now, we are dying to get going, I hope. Our tour starts from the Richardson Street entrance rather than the crematorium gates. I would suggest, however, that if you have to go to the crematorium and have time after the service, that you might like to spend a short time at that end, it being handy for the woodland burial area, the military graves, and more. The gates are open at 8 o'clock each morning, 365 days, closed at 5 at the latest in autumn and winter, 8 at the latest in spring and summer, Cars can be parked in Richardson Street, and buses from the city centre drop off at Richardson Street, and the Dalston bus drops off at the at the top of the street, and also the crematorium gates. If you're lucky, you will be able to pick up a copy. Where is it? Of this walk. Can you see it? At the crematorium, at the office by the gates. And if you're more fortunate still, you might find the cafe alongside Up and Running. So off we go. If we could have, we've got the picture here. Yes, this side, as you come in where the car is, there are bollards by the curb. And these are placed to force the carriage wheels away from the walls and so prevent damage to the coach. We go straight ahead, and I'm missing out the area to the immediate right, where we will find the earliest grave and other interesting early graves. And we're doing a sweep round to come out near where the car is, at the chapel. But we're also missing out on the baby memorial garden. But because of time, I just have to go zooming straight up past this avenue of views. The clippings from these are used to make an anti-cancer drug. And I think they're pretty splendid. By now, we're at the crossroads. And on the left, we've got to the chapel now, David. So we find on the left the chapel, which is on consecrated ground, with a similar chapel to the right, which is the dissenters' mortuary chapel. And this reflects the original Christian pattern of the time. Consecrated ground was for the Church of England. The others, Catholics, Quakers, the famous ones of these in Carlisle being of the Carr family, the Methodists and so on, they were in the unconsecrated ground. And amongst those on the consecrated side is Nicholason's memorial, which is the most imposing grave in the whole of the Victorian cemetery. We can come back to it later if you want. Now, these Victorians, oh yes, there it is. I can return to that if you want to, thank you. It wasn't just Church of England and dissenters. The social order is also reflected in the grave layout. The wealthy rest in the most expensive graves at the front. Behind are the middle classes with medium-sized memorials. And at the back, the poor who could not afford a memorial are buried in pauper graves. Now, these are my illustrations, and they go back 14 years. And that was why I wanted to use them, because I guess they must be much more weathered by now. that these were taken by Thurley Grundy, and she was my art teacher. And she took these because I wanted to do a sort of collage arrangement. We have that somewhere, David. Yes, I gathered them together. And the squirrel and the owl you can see from the area we're now standing in. But the horse is in the Travellers' Ward, and I'll come to that later. So we're now heading on for the bridge over the stream. Now a pause here used to be a chance for a picnic. And as we had the picnic, the able-bodied were able to scramble down to the water. So we'll just have maybe a coffee stop here, if you brought your flasks, and Harry and David have some more slides to show at this point. By now, it's probably obvious that perhaps a whole day will be needed to cover everything, and many decide to have an hour or two and then come back again and again to cover the whole area. So we're now going to have a coffee stop and a few slides.
Thank you, Ruth. So here's just, these are, I think, virtually all Harry Gill's pictures. Unfortunately, Harry can't join us on this morning, but some pictures from cemeteries. This is so one of the front graves near the entrance, which shows not how the other half lived, but how the other half die, or are remembered, I should say. And a wonderful double grave surrounded by yews. And many avenues of daffodils. They've just gone over now, but you can see them there in their glory. A picture of some war graves. There's a couple more photographs coming up later. We have, that I've seen, war graves, of course, from our own forces in Great Britain. But there are Polish graves, New Zealand graves, Canadian graves that I've seen, and German graves. There are probably others, but I haven't spotted those yet. And this is, I think, from last year's blossom, but the trees are in the same resplendent condition today. There are many nature walks through the cemetery, and many paths that run through. It's beautiful, and you'll see squirrels and a heronry and all sorts of wildlife, including our famous deer. I've seen 4 so far, so I don't know exactly how many there are in the herd, but there are at least 4, and they live in the cemetery. I don't know how tame they are, but they if you see them, they'll stand still for you to take a photograph. This is down to the woodland burial at the bottom end of the cemetery, out towards Cummersdale Homes. And this is the arch through into or from the crematorium. So if you, as Ruth said, if you went to the crematorium and wanted to walk through, you would walk through this arch to the site that's currently used. This, I think, is a picture of one of the memorial gardens where ashes are either scattered or buried in this in the crematorium. This is just a picture of a large redwood tree in the nature conservation area in the garden of the cemetery. Beautiful tree. You can see just a bird box fastened to the side. another picture of the Avenue of Yews, and here a couple more pictures of the graves, military graves, and the memorial. And then some bluebells which are out to, this is from this morning, this photograph. So bluebells out today. And here we are returning back to the bridge over Fairy Bay, which runs through our new housing estate where I'm living, through Amberwood and up to Morton. And there it is, as it is today. And then back over the other side, Ruth, I don't know whether you want to pick up from around this point. This is a current garden and the Travellers' garden.
Yes, I can pick up from here, but I'm ad-libbing at this point. I haven't written a script, but the map that you were shown right at the beginning is divided up into areas or wards, and you won't find the Travellers' ward on it, but it's in one of the blank areas, and there's a very good reason for this. If they put it on the guide, it would become a focus, and there are very recent graves there, and it wouldn't be appropriate to have people constantly going and taking photographs. You know, if you go there, you have to be very sensitive to the situation and not intrude on people who might be grieving for somebody who's recently been buried there. But the graves are very ornate. You see the headstone here with the family on it, and we don't have it here, but there is the horse, and I've been told that the Travellers were delighted that the dead tree in that area had been carved to give them a horse, because you realise Appleby Horse Fair horses are a major part in the Travellers' lives. So having sort of tiptoed round, I'll say a little bit about the woodland site. I've got a leaflet here. In time, the woodland site will become a forest. This is for people. The woodland graves offer a return to nature for those who wish to be buried with trees and amongst graves, and trees and amongst birds, mammals and wildflowers. And this new woodland will provide a living memorial that will offer benefits and pleasures to future generations. And I think they're oak trees, but you get a sapling, and that sapling goes above you, and it might remain, or it might have to be thinned out later on, as is in the case with all woodland planting. But this is the specific wildlife area. You can't have this spot, you can't have a memorial there, but there is a wall as you go in with seating in front, I think. And some people have chosen to have a small granite memorial embedded in the wall to say they're here. whilst others, if they don't want that, can just have the names in a book of memorial at the cemetery office or at the crematorium after a post. I think perhaps it's time to unmute and see if people want to say anything further.